Good evening, and welcome to Storytime with Jason. I'm Jason, and tonight is our inaugural podcast. I'm going to talk about a little bit behind the why of why I'm doing this podcast, and do a little introduction to Aesop's Fables, which will be our first series. As for the why, like a lot of children, my mother read me and my siblings stories growing up, and I always loved it. And when my younger brother was born, I would make up bedtime stories for him, and he would want to, add, different things that he wanted into the stories, and so I'd have to improv it on the fly, and I really loved it. And I was always a little disappointed any years after that I never recorded any of those. But so now's my chance to kind of, right that wrong. And my wife and I are expecting our first child here soon, so it seemed like the perfect time to get back into it and, correct the mistakes of old and, record the stories I tell her and record the stories I love. And a podcast seemed like the perfect time to do it, perfect way to do it. There are going to be three guidelines I'm going to self follow. And nothing's making me follow these guidelines, but it's just kind of three goals. One is, as you can tell already from this recording, this is story time. It's not perfection time. Life doesn't have an edit button, and I take it seriously, but not so serious to be infallible. It's one of the things I dislike about social media and a lot of the metaverse is that it always encourages us to show ourselves in the best positive light and always show a smiling happy face and how glamorous our life is, and that's just not true. Life is work, and especially when I read, I jump lines, I have a hard time pronouncing words, I mispronounce words, and I'm not going to try and hide that. I'll do my best, and I will absolutely take it seriously and take it professionally as I can. But when I get tongue tied or if I miss a line and have to go back, I apologize in advance, but I also don't really apologize. And the second is that life is rough, and I want this to be a positive experience. I want it to be a positive experience for me to record it, and I want it to be a positive experience for anybody who listens to it. It doesn't mean we're not going to talk about some stories that might be a little sad, some ghost stories, get into some topics that require parental explanation, and I'll be sure to call those out when they come. But I want it to be a place of overall positivity where if you listen to this podcast, that you'll leave in a better frame of mind, a better emotional state, a better spirit than when you arrived. And I know that when I record these podcasts, I finish the project in a better place as well. And the third is that I'm going to be making some stuff up. Now when I'm reading Aesop's Fables, which I'll get into the explanation here in a second. When I'm reading Aesop's Fables, I'll update some of the language, specifically the rooster and the donkey. I'm not going to use, old language for those. But some of the podcasts I'm going to do are me improv making up bedtime stories. And I'll go more into that later. But it's going to be, and that kind of brings it back around to the previous few points, is that it's going to be fun, it's going to be lighthearted, and I'm just really, really excited to be a part of this and to be doing this project and having you listen to it. On to Aesop's Fables and a little bit of an introduction. Aesop wrote his fables, is credited with writing his fables around 550 BC. And depending on where you look, there's some question as to whether or not Aesop existed or if it was a composite of several writers. But I have from the Project Gutenberg website, which if you've never gone to that website, I strongly encourage you to, a translation of Aesop Fables by Joseph Jacobs. And I think it's great, and I am, like I said earlier, I'm going to update a little bit of the language, not enough to change the substance, but just enough to kind of make it more suitable for the younger audience. And in his manuscript, Jacobs has a great historical introduction to Aesop. And I'm not going to read the whole thing just because this isn't a history podcast, but I am going to read the first and the last paragraph of it, which kind of frames it a little bit for us. Quote, "Most nations develop a beast tale as part of their folklore. Some go further and apply it to satiric purposes. And a few nations afford isolated examples of the shaping of the beast tale to teach some moral truth by means of the fable properly so called. The allegory gives us a pleasing and not too strenuous stimulation of the intellectual powers. The lesson is not too complicated for childlike minds. Indeed, in their grotesque grace, in their quaint humor, and in their trust in the simpler virtues, in their insights into the cruder vices, in their innocence of the facts, Aesop's fables are as little children. They are as little children, and for that reason, they will forever find a home in the heaven of little children's souls. All right, well, that takes care of the broad strokes for the introduction and both of the podcast and Aesop's Fables. We're going to kick off episode 1, and I appreciate your time. Thanks for listening.